Get 10 or 12
That's when we destroyed a
capsules, Pete, because he can tell them forever, and he loves it.
You heard about the Hershey Bar story, didn't you?
No.
Well, when we'd been on open hour, of course, they didn't have all the facilities and everything up there, but the planes were getting sort of rickety and the crews were getting draggy. We were sleeping in a mud hole every night and flying all day. But they sent 2 or 3 crews back at a time for a little R&R at Tinian before we went back to open up. When we were there, we were down on the line, piddling around at the plane and just sort of straightening up. Well, it was just resting. Well, guys, just like we are here, sitting around talking, and there were other crews around there, and somebody else walked up, and I don't even remember who it was, and said, "This is a hell of a war." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I want a Hershey bar so bad," said, "and it's not a Hershey bar on this island." Well, they kept talking about it, and kids is always making a big joke out of everything. They said, "Yeah," said, "the Big Island, Saipan, they got it all." Said, "They probably got them over there, but we don't get the stuff they get." Well, it led on more and more, and finally somebody said, "Well, why don't we just fly over Saipan and see if they get it?" So it was a mixture of guys, but Dougal was flying. So I don't even remember which plane, but I got it in my logbook. And it's just a up and down flight over the strait. We got up, somebody ran up, checked, came back, said, "No Hershey bars here either." So we started back to Tinian, so we took off, got up, before we landed, somebody on the plane said, "Well, Guam's just 100 miles south," and he said, "That's an old possession of the..."
Been there for a year now.
Been there and everything, they got all the facilities down there. Said, "Let's go to Guam." Nobody had ever been to Guam. We flew the 100 miles down to Guam, and I'm trying to think of the name of that strip.
Anderson?
No, it was it started with an A with a short name. But anyway,
Madonna, wasn't it?
Agana. It was Agana. So we landed on Agana and hit it pretty hot. But the runway was level. And it was, where we landed, it was even with the turf out here. But as it went down, there was a big drop off at the far end of it. And man, we were rolling. I think it was just a fighter strip. And Ruby said, "I don't think I'm going to be able to stop this." He was on the brakes. I said, "Well, rev up your outboard and try to turn on the taxiway." He said, "I don't think that's going to work either." But we tried it. And we went off that side, broke that thing half into it. I mean, it wasn't all that much, but it was enough to get off, and we get that thing splattered. I could have gotten the Purple Heart, I guess, because I bruised my arm.
Yeah.
And we got out of there. And then to add to that story, other than my buddy and I enlisted together, and we got separated. And I knew he was in the Pacific somewhere. And every time I'd go to a different island, I'd check the pay list to find out if he was there, and I'd never found him. And while I was there, and there's a big crowd gathered around where the plane was, nobody was hurt. And the mess hall was not too far from it, and I said, "Well, I'm gonna run up there and check the pay list." His name was Lineberry. I checked that, and it had been up there a few days. They just stapled it to it. It was a wooden structure. The L's were missing on it. So I walked back down there, and we were gonna have to figure out how we were gonna get back to Tinian. And I was standing there and just shoulder to shoulder with some people, and something caught my eye, and I turned and looked, and that was my buddy standing right beside me, and I turned, and he says, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "I'm looking for a Hershey Bar." He said, they got some ship service right around the corner up there. I said, "Well, I was looking for it, but I said, I think I'm gonna pass on that." But he said, "Man, that's a mess out there, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, it sure looks like it." He said, "I wonder what happened." I said, "I have no idea." And he never did know that I was on the plane. He thought I was just on the aisle.
Was that Doobie again?
Huh?
Who was the
That was
BBC?
good.
It's a wonder he lasted.
But it was a big 24, brought us back to
Tinian?
Tinian.
You
And
remember
we
who you got
never heard any more about that.
Well, airplanes were expendable. That was a war zone.
That was about, at that time, it was less than $400,000.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Well, besides, it was a war. Who cared? If it was in the way, push it off the side.
That's right.
Do you remember one time at Tinian, I went up on a test flight with one of the airplanes and changed an in on or something. And he came back and landed at Tinian and low. And you know, both ends of the runway were down about 4 or 5 feet where the runway started. And he came in too low and pulled the gear out from under it. That was one of the lieutenants.
There's several of them that,
Yeah.
That's what we did at Evil. It tore off the starboard landing.
Did you?
Gear, and it went through the tail. We scattered Marines. I mean,
He's recording again. Surreptitiously.
Yeah. I had some.
Well, and the hard Hershey Bar didn't satisfy this guy, huh? Remember, in all the sea rations, God, one of the trading things was a little Hershey Bar.
Well, I had the Hershey. I still got the ones that was in that little canvas survival
They were
kit.
good.
Well,
They wouldn't melt or.
I wasn't the one that was looking for
Yeah.
a Hershey Bar anyway, but we took a Hershey Bar and take your knife and scrape it and make
Coffee,
chocolate.
hot chocolate.
Yeah.
Harder than the hinges of hell. They wouldn't melt in the tropics.
But I've had more funny things happen than the bad things that happened. But,
And the bad things became good things over
oh yeah.
the years. They do.